He worked himself face forward through tight passes. He'd gotten himself to a point where he couldn't back up.
John Edward Jones enjoyed going caving with his family. When they were young, his father routinely brought him and his brother Josh on caving excursions in Utah. And with time, the lads came to appreciate the dark beauty and depths below the earth. Unfortunately, John's first trip inside Nutty Putty Cave, located 55 miles south of Salt Lake City and southwest of Utah Lake, was also his last. So what happened to John Edward, and why couldn't he be saved? Let's find out. When Nutty Putty Cave was initially discovered in 1960, it soon gained notoriety for its claustrophobic corridors, slick surfaces, and tight bends. The birth canal, the aorta crawl, the scout eater, and the maze are some names given to the different cave sections. The complete length and depth of the hydrothermal Nutty Putty Cave have been surveyed, and they are 1,355 and 145 feet, respectively. John's father routinely took him and his younger brother Josh on caving expeditions across Utah, so the two had plenty of spelunking experience. Josh wasn't his only sibling. John Edwards was one of 16 nieces and nephews born into a large family of 5 males and 2 girls. John had just become a parent and was pursuing his pediatric cardiology training, and his wife was expecting their second child at the time of the tragedy. On November 24, 2009, the brothers John and Josh decided to reignite their passion for caving by exploring Nutty Putty Cave. They arrived at the cave location at about 8 p.m. on Wednesday, a few days before Thanksgiving. When they went into Nutty Putty Cave, they weren't alone. 9 other friends and acquaintances joined them. For over an hour, everything went without a hitch. The big slide, the cave's largest room, had been explored by the group. As time went on, John, Josh, and 2 of their friends made the decision to attempt a task they've heard about: traversing the birth canal, a difficult corridor that finally leads to a larger opening. The first to move was John, who wriggled ahead for a while but failed to notice any wider space. He moved a little bit more, but the tight space didn't widen. Instead, it took a sudden downhill curve. John moved ahead with assurance, maybe realizing the tunnel became larger at the bottom, but it was already too late. The problem started 50 feet earlier. It is difficult to determine if John entered the birth canal, turned unintentionally, or wiggled into the scout eater, or if he completely missed it and entered Ed's Push, a corridor adjacent to the birth canal. But Ed's Push did not open out to a bigger space, at least not anywhere a 6'2", 200-pound guy can fit. The end of Ed's Push features 4 undiscovered tunnels. They're all too narrow for a person to travel through. In any event, John persisted until he was unable to go on. He also couldn't turn around on his own because he had wiggled into a crack that almost went straight down. He was squeezed into a space that was only 10 by 18 inches wide. This wasn't a full circle. He could only go through the narrowest part of the entrance. This is the same size as the opening of a front-loading washing machine. All John could do while he was trapped more than 100 feet below and in the depths of the cave was wait and pray. Josh, who was John's brother, was the first to locate John. Josh attempted to pull John out of the rock out of fear for how far it had sucked him in, but was only able to raise him a little bit. So he let John go and slid back into the opening. John was unable to move because one hand was pinned beneath him and the other was pushed aside. Although his feet and ankles were free, they served little use as gravity dragged him downward. Josh went back to the ground as quickly as he could, slowly wiggling out of the narrow space and rushing to the surface after they both muttered a short prayer. Once outside, he made an immediate call for assistance, leaving their friend to stay with John. Susan, a volunteer rescue worker from the area, was the first person to help. She instantly stopped what she was doing after hearing about the situation on her rescue pager and sped to the location in her Toyota. It had been more than 3 hours since John had been stranded in the cave when she finally arrived at midnight. Susan quickly and easily got to John due to her small size and agility. Several hours later, hundreds of rescuers showed up. The rescue crew immediately came up with one strategy after another before deciding to utilize a rescue rope that goes through a series of climbing cams with one end wrapped around John's legs and the other end pulled by a crew. They reviewed everything, even lubricating the cave walls. They also attempted to drill away chunks of rock close to John at the same time, but the difficult terrain and uncomfortable positioning made drilling a tedious and painful process. They barely succeeded in drilling through a few inches of rock in more than an hour. John's body positioning further hampered things. The rescuers could only see his feet due to his virtually upside-down position, and because the wall above them hung so low, they were unable to simply pull him out due to his feet getting in the way. Rescuers worked hard to use their first set of climbing cams, but they were not able to do so. After that, they tried to use a rope pulley system. securing the pulleys with bolts and driving the bolts deep into the cave walls. But the cave was narrow, making everything more challenging. Even though there was a large group of rescuers, volunteers, and emergency services, and a rescue plan outside, only one person could get close to John. John was becoming worse at this point since he had been hanging upside down for a while and was having some trouble breathing. His heart was working twice as hard to fight gravity and force the continuous blood flow out of his head. He was vacillating between terror and composure. They eventually managed to drop a two-way cable radio to him so he could communicate with his wife, who was standing close to the cave entrance on the surface. At this point, John had already spent 19 hours upside down. When the rescuers eventually completed setting up their pulley system and began bringing John out, everything changed. They tugged together as a tandem of 8 guys. They frequently took breaks since John was in the excruciating discomfort. But with each tug, they were able to lift John a little higher. After being pulled up for the 3rd time, John was finally high enough to look at the rescuer who was closest to him. He had a filthy face, red eyes, and a fatigued appearance, but otherwise, he seemed okay. The rescuer saw that John was grinning despite his complaints. After taking another nap, they decided to keep lifting John. He was about to be free. But then, something even worse happened. Something happened when the rescue crew raised John for the 4th time. The rope suddenly came loose in their hands and the entire squad toppled backwards. The nearest rescuer briefly lost consciousness after feeling a severe blow to the face. When he awoke, all he could see was dust. He noticed the nearest key bolt had come off, and the stone arc where the rope was wrapped around John's legs had cracked once, and the dust had cleared a little. He couldn't tell where John was in the dust, but he quickly understood that John had slid straight back into the fissure, this time appearing to be considerably deeper than before. The rescuer had to switch places with his dad, who was also on the rescue team, because the metal carabiner hit him in the face and hurt him so badly that he kept trying to save John. He understood that John was fighting for his life when he got to him, since his breathing was shallow and less frequent. And this time, no answer came as the rescuer screamed out for John. In an effort to tie the rope around John's waist, his father desperately tried to lower himself into the fissure, but got trapped. When he was able to free himself, he dug a new hole for the pulley and crawled tiredly out of the cave, only to be replaced by another rescuer who attempted but failed to pull John out. Later, a doctor went into the cave and found John. On November 25th at midnight, John was declared dead. He was 26 at the time. A total of 137 rescuers had put in a heroic 27-hour effort to save John, but they were forced to leave the heartbreaking scene. The next day, the authorities decided that it would be too hard and dangerous to take his body out of the cave. This meant that John Edwards Jones would always be buried in Nutty Putty Cave. A week later, the government agreed to keep Nutty Putty Cave closed to the public for good. Since then, it has been sealed, and in honor of John, his family had a plaque installed at the cave's entrance. So, what do you think about John Edwards' tragic experience, and do you think it could have been avoided?